Hello and welcome to Talk the Walk. I'm Azam Khan. One of the most influential yet overlooked historical figure ever is Admiral Zheng He, or Cheng Ho, a Chinese explorer and diplomat during the Ming Dynasty, around the early 15th century. His diplomatic voyages are legendary, commanding massive fleets that sailed throughout Southeast Asia, the Indian subcontinent, East Africa, and beyond, expanding trade and cultural exchange between China and the world, with impacts still seen today. Presently, when China is now projecting its soft power influence economically and becoming a key voice in mediating major global conflict, we juxtapose this when China was last at the forefront of global exchange and engagement. My guest today is a former scientist with a PhD in chemical physics from the US, who decades later has dedicated her life into studying pre-Columbus voyages and historical maps, and has written books and research papers on Admiral Zheng He, a student of historical landscape of Sino-Western relations. She also founded a forum, China-US Friendship Exchange, in 2006, which aims at improving Sino-US relations. Dr. Sheng-Wei Wang. Dr. Wang, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation.
So Admiral Zheng He, renowned, historical, yet not much is known about him proportionate to his impact.
Right.
So can you share with the audience a little bit about who he was?
Sure. Zheng He's original name was Ma He, and he was born in a Muslim family in Yunnan. But his father died when the Ming soldiers went to Yunnan to conquest. So he was then captured as a prisoner. And then soon afterwards, he was castrated. And then he was sent to serve in the household of Zhu Di. Zhu Di was then Prince Yan. Okay, and about Zheng He's personal life and personality, very little is known. However, historical records show that he was about 7 feet tall, and his voice was as loud as a bell. So very interesting. So, but Zheng He, Ma He made a great contribution during the Zhu Di's called Jingnan campaign. So Zhu Di then became Emperor Yongle. Okay, to reward Ma He, then Zhu Di gave a new last name to Ma He. So then Ma He became Zheng He. Okay, in the early 15th century, then Emperor Yongle and Emperor Shende, both of them ordered Zheng He to sail to the Western Ocean, to the many countries there. And the Western Ocean meant Indian Ocean and beyond by the Ming Dynasty. The purpose of these voyages was trying to establish or expand the tributary system in Ming Dynasty. The tributary system was basically a very loose international trade network and foreign relations. However, after the seventh voyage, then due to the internal fight between the Confucius scholars and the eunuchs, then the Ming court decided to stop any future voyage. Okay, so the power vacuum created by Ming's withdrawal from this world stage was very quickly grasped by the European sea power. And they start to take the rest of the world into their sphere of influence.
And a lot of his voyages helped to spread and expand cultural trade. Could you just give examples of those that we still see today?
Sure. The best example I give would be Malaysia. When Zheng He first visited Malacca, it's an important place in Malaysia now, they was in 1405, and Malacca was only a fishing village and had a few thousand people. So Zheng He established a huge Chinese community there and introduced Chinese customs, music, cuisine, dance, or even religion to the community. And so till this day, we still see these cultures living in Malacca. So when Zheng He made the last visit to Malacca in the 1430s. Malacca was already on the way to become a very important regional trading port. And we can see that today, China and Malaysia still had a very good trading relationship. And from 2009 to 2021, China was the top trading partner of Malaysia. Another good example is the Chinese sea goddess Ma Zu was the always protect the sailors at sea, and Ma Zu was the face of Zheng He's mariners. But we can see that Ma Zu is now and was and is still now the face of the people live in the coast of many of the South Asian countries, as well as other parts of Asia.
And a lot of his voyages were diplomatic focused, and its focus was on exchanging, versus a lot of contemporaries which are more well known from the West, which had slightly more of a different imperial or colonial sort of mindset of an agenda. So would you say that's accurate?
Yes, it's really accurate that you point that out, because Zheng He is remembered as mainly someone who attained his goal through diplomacy. Okay, except at the early stage of his voyages, he was forced to use military power to calm down some obstacles, hostilities. But once that were done, then basically he maintained the safe and peaceful passage from South China Sea.
It wasn't a conquest, yeah.
It wasn't conquest, yeah. He was forced to calm down, otherwise they cannot proceed.
Sure.
Yes. And so, but China had no territorial desire, about these places. So once the seaway is all clear, then they just go on with all the trade and relations exchange. That's all,
And and his fleets were massive, right? I mean, this is
Yes.
very well documented and known that his boat itself was several times larger than that of Columbus, for example.
Oh,
his
yes.
fleets was even more exponentially larger than Columbus's fleets.
Sure.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes, that's true. And so even though they were not doing anything aggressive, but however, these grand fleets and these voyages did created a revolutionary kind of influence in the international trade and the foreign relations. And so after that, all the technologies, the maps, and the knowledges passed to the Europeans and just ushered the age of discovery, and accompanied by the European Renaissance and, of course, the awful colonialism.
Could you talk a little bit about the nature of your work? And it's very fascinating to me to hear that studying these sorts of maps. And so can you talk about how you get access to them and the nature of that work?
It's actually a long story, if I can make it shorter. That is, once I started to work on the Zheng He project from 2013, I quickly produced a Chinese book called Authored with Other People. That the book, and then I wrote my own English book. And the title of my own book is The Last Journey of the Sanbao Eunuch, Admiral Zheng He. But these two books both show that Zheng He's fleet had made the cross-Atlantic voyage to reach the place in the central Mississippi Valley in the in today's United States. So both books prove that. However, but there's still controversies there. But why do they say Columbus was the first to discover America? And why were there so many unknown areas on the Western maps even before the Europeans discovered them? These are questions I want to answer. So could these things have something to do with Zheng He's fleets? These are the things I want to find out.
And a lot of his work was, and the records were eradicated, correct, by the emperor.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about how that?
Yes, because due to the internal fights, and so the voyages were terminated, and all the records were burned, the ships were burned, or the record may be hidden. Actually, there might be still some records. There are many books and records. Americas there. So it made us, today, the scholars, very difficult to restore what actually happened, So we're really trying hard. But I decided to study this very important ancient world map called 昆舆万国全图. In English, it means the overall maps of all the countries in the world. And this map was published in 1602 by an Italian priest, Matteo Ricci, Li Ma Dou. Chinese people know him as Li Ma Dou. In this map, I found out, actually, this is not a European map. This is actually a map of Chinese origin. So I was able to investigate over 500 geographical terms, about half of the geographical terms on that entire map, all the geographies and histories. So I got the conclusion that Europe was explored by the Chinese in the Southern Song Dynasty. That was even before Zheng He. Africa was made final exploration by the Zheng He people in 1433. And New Zealand, Australia, Land of Fire, Antarctica, these were all explored by Chinese before, no later than the sixth voyage. Some are sixth voyage.
So a lot of your the discoveries that you have made in your work, correct me if I'm wrong, it's about the beyond the immediate region of Asia, and when he went to the Arctic or when he went to the Americas. Is that correct?
Yes, that is so far I have done. I thought out of the 1,000 places, I've done 500. Right. That is the most controversial terms. Now I'm working on the remaining 500. China, Japan, Korea.
But are those more, the China, Japan, Korea, and Southeast Asia region, are those more evident, or I want to say more prevalent in discovering because it's closer in the region and his impact is more well known there? Would you say
you'll be really surprised.
Okay.
I can quote you some preliminary result, though it's not published. Usually people keep silent, because other people may take the result and publish it. For example, the map of Japan. You would think it should be a Ming map, right? No, it's a Tang Dynasty map. It's Tang Dynasty, based on the annotations and all the analysis of all the administrative units on the map. My conclusion is it is around the time of the end of 9th century. And that was a time when Japan stopped the mission they send all the people to China to learn things, but they probably feel that they learned enough and they want to become independent in Asia as a sovereign country. So that is a significant era as far as Japanese concerned, And for China, maybe some cartographers want to record that important era too. So that is actually a Tang map, yes.
Dr. Wang, I'm going to pause you right there while we take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Dr. Sheng-Wei Wang. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Talk the Walk. I'm speaking to scholar Dr. Sheng-Wei Wang. Dr. Wang, you have an incredibly established scientific background. Can you talk about how that journey led you onto this pursuit in research?
Yes, thank you very much for your compliment first. Okay, sure. It's a long story. When before I was 38, I was mainly doing scientific research, and I was I think it's very challenging and very rewarding, and I was satisfied with my work. But then I joined a high-tech company for a few years.
This is in the United States, right?
Sorry, in the United States, okay. Yes. But as soon as I joined the company, I realized that isn't going to be my career for the rest of my life. And I always like history and like politics, diplomacy, so I decided to write a book. But without a solid background yet, I decided first I want to do translation, okay? So I translated One Country, Two Systems in Taiwan. The author is in Taiwan, so I translated that from Chinese into English as exercise my own English ability. And then I became more confident. I wrote the book called China's Ascendancy, opportunity or threat. This was very.
This was around what year did you write?
It was around early 2000s, something,
right, okay.
or almost the next 10 decades. It was very rapid, China's threat and all that. So I want to tell the American people what I think China's rise is about. So both books were honored to have book ceremonies at the Library of Congress. I think that's a really great honor. But after that, I already, by that time, I already came to Hong Kong. So I established a company called China-U.S. Friendship Exchange. Yeah. As a company, it's very simple. I use my own money. I don't spend time to seek for donations, that I can send my message or other writers' message to Americans.
From trying to reconfigure this understanding of this bilateral relations, who better than Zheng He to sort of go back to the roots? Is that what happened, like you touched on?
Actually, it was not intentionally approached that way, because then when I had this website, then many people I begin to know many people, and many people begin to know me. So, and on one occasion, there was a couple, American couple called Mark and Lori's Nicholas. Their ancestors are American Indians, so they are most interested in the Zheng He as their ancestor, perhaps, right? So they found some evidence of Chinese being in the Mississippi River, actually close to Cahokia. They found on the cliffs there's a huge carved artwork on the rock, twin dragons, rainbow dragons. That's only in Chinese legend, not anybody. And it's not something who can carry there. It's there. It was there. You have to be somebody there to make it, right? So I thought that was a very interesting story. Although the little book was only 100 pages, I agreed to translate it and edit some other stuff, and we made a Chinese book and published it in Beijing. So once that is done, then I thought, well, how did they get there? How did they get there? There's something there, but how did they get there?
See, it's sort of like you sort of reversed into...
Reversed. First, they show me some evidence. For me, that's totally eye-opening, right. Okay? It aroused my interest.
Right.
And then I started to look at Chinese literature. Then there's 1597, Luo Mao Deng has this epic work. It's a novel. It's called a novel, but it's actually a historical one. So it's based on history, and they made this kind of a mystical type. So I analyzed his book and extracted Zheng He's navigation routes, timelines, and evidence for his last journey. That indeed the fleet sailed from Mecca along the east coast of Africa, round the corner of the African continent, and then propelled by the currents across the Atlantic Ocean, and then carried on by the current until the Labrador.
So now,
coast.
what do you hope to, now that you've entered this period of research, what do you hope to achieve from studying Zheng He and studying these maps? Is there a connection with the cultural exchange that you mentioned that you founded? Or is it something else?
I think it is, first, when we read history, we have to read correct history and not falsified history. So I feel that the Western history has not been honest about the Zheng He's voyages. The age of discoveries was not a discovery by the Europeans, quote unquote, age of discovery. Age of rediscovery.
What about even Chinese's own interpretation of Zheng He's history? Is it as explored as it could be?
The Chinese, I must say this, because many of these Chinese scholars, they are still deeply immersed in the document, the classical writings, the official records. But we know the Chinese history record, in the feudal systems, a lot of things were not written. Right. They were left out of the official record. And even with the Zheng He's fleet, the main fleet may have gone back to China, but there are many squadrons. These scribes are free to do what they like.
I feel like in a lot of history in that time period, the West is still also trying to figure out whether it's discovering the Vikings making contact with the Native Americans, and to what degree. So, yeah, that's very interesting. And so, would you say that there are lessons that can be drawn just from the last 10 years? How would you? I know it's difficult to summarize such a long period.
Yes, at this stage for this research field, I hope to stimulate more interest. It's not only me who is doing it, but I hope my being invited here be able to expose to more audience, English speaking or Chinese speaking, and introduce my book. I hope to arouse further interest in this field, and more people will. Because if Zheng He's fleet has navigated around the whole world, then it's not only China you can find evidence. You have to find
everywhere,
right? So this is the whole world's event.
How is just out of curiosity, even within China, how has your work and research and discoveries and books been received? Is there?
Well, many of these scholars, they don't really read English. Okay? This is one thing I hope that through my interpretation, I hope there will be people translating my book into Chinese first, and then through that study, they will at least get familiar with even the geographical terms that exist in the rest of the world, rather than just some neighborhood of Nanjing or some neighborhood of Yunnan or some things. Broaden your mind and broaden your views, and read some English articles, read some new, more recent articles. And I would even especially mention about T.C. Bell's work, He is in his 90s. He spent all his retirement life. He is a Navy man and a seaman, starting from 15 years old, he was at sea, but he's a maritime engineer. And he knows survey work. So he was able to find shipwrecks in New Zealand. 78 of them were Chinese shipwrecks. And over 20 of them were of the dimension more than 100 meters. Not only that, he also found the Chinese gateways and have a rock art that can be traced back to the Song Dynasty. Song Dynasty was almost 1500 BC or 1700 BC.
So with the exchange forum that you set up, you started looking and exploring the Sino-U.S. friendship before it was even as prominent as it is today.
Yes.
And then and now you know how prominent and forefront it is in all of geopolitics. But with this in the middle, you also had all these years of studying what we talked about just now with Zheng He and everything else. How do you think that's shaped or molded your opinion on the Sino-U.S. relations and where it could go?
I see the Sino-U.S. relations that now is locked in stalemate mainly due to the American first mentality on the U.S. side and the China's rejuvenation drives in the China side, okay? This is very unhealthy. Exactly what I'm doing today, or what I'm doing, all the research work I have done is trying to tell people, hey, Chinese people started, no matter who started, but Chinese people seem to have started global exploration before other countries. And that shows we have had shared history. We have had the same destinations. T.C. Bell showed that even 5,000 before today, there was already Chinese presence in England. Okay, and then at the beginning of the century, the era, about 44 A.D. or so, the Roman people were collaborating with Chinese, building the so-called Roman Wall or Adrian's Wall. So these collaborations started a long time ago.
Dr. Wang, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Yeah, thank you.
That's all for this time. I'll see you same time next week. Goodbye.